The day started with tension in the air. The sun was high above the military training ground, and the wind blew softly across the long, open field. Soldiers stood in perfect lines, their uniforms spotless, their faces serious. In front of them, a large metal target stood exactly 4,000 meters away, so far that it looked like a tiny dot to the naked eye. The challenge was simple to hear but nearly impossible to do. Hit that target from this distance. General Marcus Carter, a tough man with years of battlefield experience, stood watching closely. His arms were crossed, and his sharp eyes moved from one soldier to another. He was known for his discipline and high expectations. That morning, he had brought his best snipers, men trained to shoot with deadly accuracy, to show their skills in front of the new recruits. But what was supposed to be an impressive display had quickly turned into an embarrassing situation. The first sniper had missed, then the second, and the third. 13 times in total, bullets had flown across the field, but none had hit the target. Each shot echoed loudly and ended with the same disappointing puff of dust in the distance. The atmosphere had changed from excitement to awkward silence. The young recruits looked nervous, shifting their feet, afraid to even breathe too loudly. The general's patience was running thin. He stared at the last sniper who had just failed and said nothing for a moment. His silence was heavier than his words. Then, with a small smirk, he broke it. "Any snipers here?" he asked loudly, his deep voice echoing through the open air. No one responded. The question hung in the air like a challenge or maybe a joke. The general let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "No one? Not one of you can hit that target? For 1,000 meters isn't the moon, gentlemen." A few of the soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to step forward. Everyone knew the shot was almost impossible. Even the best-trained snipers struggled at that distance. It wasn't just about skill. It required perfect calculation, timing, wind reading, and a little bit of luck. Missing wasn't shameful. But after 13 failed attempts in front of the general, no one wanted to be the next to try. For a few long seconds, the field was silent except for the wind brushing through the dry grass. The general turned to leave, clearly disappointed. That's when a calm, steady voice spoke up from the back. "Sir, permission to try." Heads turned instantly. Standing a few rows behind the snipers was a woman, Sergeant Emily Lawson. She wasn't part of the sniper unit. She worked in logistics, managing supplies and equipment. She was respected, but no one had ever seen her handle a sniper rifle in a demonstration like this. Her face was calm, her tone respectful but firm. The general stopped walking and looked at her, surprised. He had to make sure he heard right. "You want to take the shot, Sergeant?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Emily nodded once. "Yes, sir." A wave of murmurs spread through the line. Some of the soldiers couldn't hide their disbelief. "She's not even trained for this," one whispered. "This is crazy," another said quietly. A few chuckled, thinking it was a joke. But Emily didn't smile or back down. Her eyes were steady on the target far away. The general stared at her for a moment longer, then gave a small shrug. "All right then," he said finally, his tone half amused, half curious. "Let's see what you've got, Sergeant." He gestured toward the sniper bench. Emily walked forward slowly, her boots crunching on the gravel. The laughter and whispers faded behind her. Every step she took drew more eyes. Some soldiers folded their arms, waiting to see her fail. Others, especially the younger recruits, looked at her with silent hope, as if part of them wanted her to prove everyone wrong. The general leaned toward his aide and muttered, "Well, this should be interesting." He didn't mean it cruelly, he just didn't expect much. After all, if his trained snipers couldn't make the shot, how could a logistics officer possibly do it? Emily reached the shooting bench and looked down at the rifle. It was long, heavy, and still warm from the last sniper's failed attempt. She didn't pick it up right away. Instead, she looked at the field, the endless stretch of dirt, grass, and wind between her and the small metal target. She took a slow breath, feeling the air, listening to the silence. Behind her, the soldiers waited. The general's small smile returned. He thought she'd hesitate or back down at the last minute. But she didn't. She simply rolled up her sleeves, adjusted her gloves, and began preparing the rifle with calm, practiced movements. That was the moment when something shifted in the air. A feeling that no one could quite explain. The mocking whispers stopped. The laughter faded. Even the general, who had started the whole thing with a joke, watched closely now. There was something about the way Emily carried herself. Quiet confidence, steady focus, that demanded respect. No one knew her story yet. No one knew how many hours she had spent training alone or why she even knew how to shoot at all. But right then, on that field, with the general's challenge still echoing in the air, one thing was clear. This wasn't going to be an ordinary shot. She wasn't just stepping up to prove a point. She was stepping up to show what belief, patience, and courage could do, even in front of those who never expected it from her. All eyes were now fixed on Emily Lawson. The moment she stepped forward, the entire shooting range seemed to come alive with whispers and disbelief. A few soldiers exchanged glances. Others shook their heads as if to say, "She's making a mistake." Emily wasn't from the sniper unit. She was a logistics officer, the kind of soldier who made sure supplies reached the right place at the right time. She wasn't the kind who people expected to step up for a shooting challenge, especially not one that had defeated 13 trained snipers in a row. But Emily wasn't the kind to back down once she made a decision. Her expression was calm, her steps steady. The dust crunched under her boots as she walked toward the shooting bench. The general stood watching with a raised eyebrow, his lips curling into a faint smile. He didn't say anything at first, but his eyes said it all. He thought this was going to be amusing. When she reached the bench, Emily stopped and looked at the rifle lying there. The .50 cal sniper rifle was long, heavy, and powerful, the kind of weapon that could send a bullet across miles. She ran her gloved fingers along its barrel, feeling the metal's warmth from the last round fired. Slowly, she adjusted the scope, checked the safety, and looked through the glass to spot the distant target. Behind her, a few of the soldiers started to whisper again. "Does she even know how to use that thing?" one asked softly. Another laughed. "Maybe she's trying to impress the general." But a few others weren't so sure anymore. They noticed how confidently she handled the weapon, how she didn't rush or fumble. There was something practiced about her movements, something familiar. The general finally broke the silence. "You do realize, Sergeant," he said with a hint of humor in his voice, "that my top snipers just missed 13 times? Emily looked up, her eyes steady. "Yes, sir," she said politely, "but I'd like to try." Her calm tone made the general pause for a moment. He wasn't angry, if anything, he was intrigued. "All right then," he said, nodding. "Permission granted. Let's see what you can do." The range officer handed her a set of ear protectors and motioned her toward the shooting mat. Emily took a deep breath and knelt down, her movements smooth and deliberate. The rifle was nearly as long as her arm span, but she adjusted it easily. She checked the wind flags across the field, her eyes narrowing slightly as she observed the gentle sway of the cloth. One of the younger recruits leaned toward his friend and whispered, "She's actually serious." His friend replied, "Yeah, but come on, for 1,000 meters? Even the best miss that." Emily, however, didn't seem to hear any of it. Her world had narrowed down to the rifle, the wind, and the tiny metal target in the distance. She adjusted the scope again, fine-tuning the magnification until the small square at the end of the range became clear. It looked impossibly far, but her hands didn't shake. The general, still watching, crossed his arms and tilted his head slightly. "Tell me, Sergeant," he said with a smirk, "you ever done long-range shooting before?" Emily smiled faintly without taking her eyes off the scope. "A little, sir," she replied. Her answer made a few soldiers chuckle quietly, but the general noticed something else. Confidence. Not arrogance, but calm confidence. The kind that comes from knowing exactly what you're doing. She settled into position, lying flat on her stomach, the rifle pressed against her shoulder. The spotter beside her set up his scope, ready to call the shot. He looked unsure, not because he didn't trust her, but because the whole thing felt strange. This wasn't how demonstrations usually went. As she lined up her shot, She remembered something her father once told her when she was young. A true marksman doesn't fight the wind. They dance with it. He had been a retired sniper, and she had grown up watching him train with old rifles in their backyard. She never talked about it at the base. No one knew she had spent years learning how to read the air, measure distance with her eyes, and steady her breath under pressure. The general leaned slightly forward, his amusement fading into quiet curiosity. He noticed how Emily's breathing slowed, how she adjusted her grip slightly with every exhale. "Maybe she does know what she's doing," he murmured to himself. Around them, the soldiers stood completely silent now. The laughter and whispers had stopped. There was something powerful about watching her, a woman in a field full of doubters, steadying herself to do what even the most skilled men had failed to do. The spotter called out the distance again. 4,000 meters. Wind speed, 8 miles per hour, westward. Emily nodded slightly. She adjusted the elevation dial on the rifle, her fingers moving with precision. Then she looked through the scope once more, aligning her crosshairs perfectly on the target. From the corner of his eye, the general noticed that even the birds seemed to have gone quiet. The air felt heavy, charged. He couldn't help but feel a spark of anticipation. He'd seen countless shooting demonstrations in his career, but this moment felt different. Emily took one last deep breath, her heartbeat steady. Her right hand tightened gently around the trigger. She wasn't nervous, she was focused. For her, this wasn't about proving the general wrong or making a name for herself. It was about something deeper, showing that skill and patience don't belong to a rank or a gender. The general watched as she steadied the rifle and prepared to fire. The soldiers behind her waited in silence, their eyes wide, their disbelief slowly turning into hope. No one knew it yet, but in the next few seconds, the range would witness something unforgettable. The moment when a quiet, underestimated woman would rewrite everything they thought they knew about precision, courage, and strength. Emily lay flat on the ground, the rough mat beneath her pressing against her elbows. The long sniper rifle rested firmly on its bipod, and through the scope, the world looked smaller, distant, silent, and perfectly still. The 4,000-meter target looked tiny, barely visible, but she didn't blink. Around her, dozens of soldiers stood watching, waiting for her to fail. After all, 13 of the Army's best snipers had already missed. No one believed a logistics officer and a woman could do what they couldn't. The air was thick with tension. The general stood behind her, arms folded, his face unreadable. "You know how far that target is?" he asked in a voice that was half mocking, half curious. Emily didn't look up. "Yes, sir," she replied calmly. 4,000 meters. Wind coming from the west, around 8 miles per hour. The general raised an eyebrow. She had noticed the same details even before the spotter had reported them. "You planning to adjust for that?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she said again, adjusting the elevation dial with slow precision. A faint murmur went through the soldiers. Some were impressed, others still doubtful. Emily's calmness seemed strange to them, like she wasn't just guessing, but actually knew what she was doing. The general studied her for a moment, then stepped back, deciding to stay silent and see what happened. Emily's eyes stayed locked through the scope. She breathed in deeply, then slowly exhaled, her breath forming a soft fog in front of her. She felt her heartbeat, steady, slow, controlled. This was the most important moment of her military life, yet she didn't let nerves take over. Every tiny sound around her, the wind rustling the grass, the crunch of boots behind her, faded away. Her mind drifted back for a second, to her childhood. She remembered sitting on a hillside with her father, an old rifle laid across his knees. "The bullet is like your heartbeat," he used to tell her. "It listens to your calm, your fear, your focus. Control your breath and you control the shot." She had practiced for years, shooting at tin cans and distant tree stumps, learning how to read the wind by watching the sway of grass. She had never imagined those lessons would come back to her in front of a general and an entire military base. She blinked once, returning to the present. The target was clear now, centered perfectly in the crosshairs. The sun glinted faintly off the metal plate far away. Emily made one last adjustment to the scope and whispered quietly to herself, "Right 3 clicks for wind, down 1 for distance." Her fingers turned the knobs smoothly. Behind her, a few soldiers shifted uncomfortably. One whispered, "She's taking too long." Another replied, "Or maybe she knows something we don't." The general didn't speak. His sharp eyes watched every move she made. Emily's breathing slowed even more. She took one last deep inhale, then exhaled halfway and held it, the perfect moment of stillness. Her finger moved gently to the trigger. She didn't pull. She squeezed slowly, like her father had taught her. Click. The rifle thundered. The sound tore through the silence, echoing across the valley like a cannon. The recoil pushed against her shoulder, but she didn't flinch. The bullet flew, invisible to the human eye, slicing through wind and distance faster than sound. Everyone held their breath. Took several seconds for the result. Those seconds felt like minutes. The spotter squinted through his scope, following the vapor trail. Then his eyes widened. The general leaned forward. "Well?" he demanded. The spotter didn't speak at first. He looked again, as if not believing what he saw. Then he said, in a shaky voice, "Impact, sir." She hit it. For a moment no one moved. The silence was heavy, almost unreal. The soldiers blinked, unsure if they had heard correctly. Emily stayed still, her eye still on the scope, double-checking for herself. The target, the tiny metal plate 4,000 meters away, had a clean, perfect hole right in the center. The general's jaw dropped slightly. His smirk vanished, replaced by something else, respect. He removed his cap slowly, staring at the target. "That's impossible," he murmured. But he knew it wasn't. She had done it. Emily finally lifted her head, her expression calm, almost peaceful. She didn't smile or celebrate. She simply exhaled softly and set the rifle down beside her. The soldiers behind her began to whisper again, but this time with awe instead of mockery. "She actually hit it? That was one shot. No one's ever done that before." The general walked closer to her, his boots crunching against the dirt. He stopped beside her and looked down. "How did you?" he started, then stopped himself. He realized the answer was simple: skill. Not luck, not chance, real skill. Emily looked up at him, her eyes steady. "Sir," she said quietly, "sometimes it's not about strength, it's about focus." The general couldn't help but smile, though it was small and thoughtful. "Focus, huh?" he repeated. "Well, Sergeant, you just made history on my range." As he spoke, the other soldiers started to clap. Slowly at first, then louder. Even the snipers who had failed before joined in, their pride replaced by admiration. Emily stood up, dusted her uniform, and gave a small nod toward the target. The general watched her walk back toward the group, shaking his head in disbelief. He had begun the morning with laughter and sarcasm, but now he felt something else: respect and humility. In that moment, everyone on the field realized something powerful. True skill doesn't always wear rank, and greatness doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it's the quietest person in the room, or on the range, who surprises everyone. Emily had come to the field as a logistics officer, a name few even noticed before. But now, she had become the woman who did what 13 trained snipers couldn't: hit a 4,000-meter target with a single perfect shot. The sound of the shot still echoed faintly in the distance when Emily began preparing for her next attempt. Though she had already done the impossible once, she wasn't satisfied yet. She wanted to be sure it wasn't luck. She wanted to prove that precision and skill were behind every move she made. The soldiers behind her were still whispering, their voices filled with shock and admiration. The general stood silently, arms crossed, watching with a new kind of focus. His earlier smirk had disappeared completely. Emily didn't rush. She rechecked the rifle with patient, careful movements. She adjusted the bipod, wiped the scope lens with a small cloth, and took a slow, deep breath. Her calmness made the others quiet again. No one dared to interrupt her. The air around the range seemed heavier now. Everyone was waiting to see if she could do it again. She took out a small notebook from her pocket, old, worn, and filled with handwritten numbers and notes. Inside were calculations, distance charts, and wind correction tables. She flipped through it quickly, checking her notes for the right angle and bullet drop for the long distance. One of the officers nearby whispered, "She brought her own notes?" The general heard and smiled slightly. "Seems like she came prepared," he said quietly. Emily had always been like that, organized, methodical, and deeply focused. While most people thought of her as just a logistics officer, she had spent years studying ballistics and long-range marksmanship in her free time. Her father had taught her how to shoot, but she had taught herself the science behind it. She believed that every bullet told a story of wind, air pressure, distance, and timing. As she adjusted the elevation knob on the scope, she murmured softly to herself, doing quick mental math. At 4,000 meters, bullet drop is almost 60 meters. Wind pushing left, 3 clicks right. Her voice was calm, steady, and confident. She adjusted everything precisely, not guessing, calculating. The general took a step closer, speaking quietly to his aide. "She's not guessing. She's actually calculating in her head." The aide nodded, amazed. "Sir, that's not something even most trained snipers do this fast." The general's expression softened with respect. "That's because she's not just a shooter. She's a thinker." Emily lay down again, her body perfectly aligned with the rifle. She placed her cheek gently on the stock, closed one eye, and peered through the scope. The world outside disappeared once again. All she could see was the tiny square of metal 4,000 meters away, shimmering faintly in the heat. She could feel the wind brushing against her neck. It was stronger now, shifting slightly. To most, that would mean a bad shot, but Emily smiled faintly. "Come on then," she whispered to the wind, as if challenging it. She adjusted her aim just a little. Every movement she made was slow, graceful, and deliberate. For a brief moment, the memory of her father returned again, the way he used to guide her hand, teaching her how to control her breathing. "Don't fight the wind," he used to say. "Let it guide you. It can be your enemy or your friend, you decide." That memory filled her heart with quiet strength. The general and the soldiers could see it in her body language. She wasn't nervous at all. She looked peaceful, almost as if she belonged there, in that exact position. The other snipers watching her began to realize something important. Her success wasn't just about talent. It was about patience, focus, and discipline, qualities they had overlooked. After several minutes of preparation, Emily finally exhaled deeply and whispered, "Ready." The spotter beside her, still looking amazed, called out the conditions again. Wind speed, 9 miles per hour, west to east. Distance, 4,000 meters. She nodded, made one final tiny correction, and steadied her finger on the trigger. Everything around her fell silent. The soldiers barely breathed. Even the general, who had seen hundreds of battles and training exercises, found himself holding his breath. The moment stretched out, calm before the storm. Then, once again, the thunder of the rifle cracked through the air. The recoil jolted her shoulder, the muzzle flash lit the ground in front of her, and the bullet soared away, invisible but deadly. The seconds that followed felt endless. Everyone's eyes were on the spotter. He tracked the bullet through his scope, then suddenly gasped. "Hit! Dead center again!" he shouted. The soldiers erupted in disbelief. Some clapped, others cheered. A few just stood frozen, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. 2 shots, both perfect hits. No one in the entire unit had ever seen that before. The general took off his cap slowly and let out a small laugh. Not mocking this time, but full of respect. "Unbelievable," he said softly. "Absolutely unbelievable." He looked down at Emily, who was calmly setting the rifle down and removing her ear protectors. She didn't smile widely or celebrate. She just nodded respectfully toward the general, as if it were all part of her duty. He stepped closer, speaking quietly so only she could hear. "Sergeant, I don't know where you learned to shoot like that, but you just embarrassed my best men." Emily looked up and said humbly, "Sir, I didn't mean to embarrass anyone. I just wanted to try." Her answer made the general chuckle. Well, Sergeant, you didn't just try. You succeeded where others failed. He turned to the group and shouted, Ladies and gentlemen, looks like we've just found our new long-range expert. The soldiers burst into applause again. Some of the snipers even walked up to her, shaking her hand and congratulating her sincerely. There was no jealousy now, only admiration. She had earned their respect in the purest way possible, through skill, courage, and calm under pressure. As Emily stood there, the wind brushing against her face, she glanced once more at the distant target. The sunlight gleamed on the two perfect bullet holes. It wasn't just metal that had been pierced that day. It was doubt, bias, and expectation. She had proved that true strength doesn't come from power or rank. It comes from patience, knowledge, and quiet confidence. That day, Emily didn't just hit a target. She hit every heart watching her, reminding them that greatness sometimes hides behind humility, and that those who are quiet often carry the loudest power of all. The world around Emily had gone completely silent. The smell of gunpowder still hung in the air, and a faint cloud of dust drifted near the rifle's barrel. She didn't move right away. Her cheek still rested on the stock, her eyes fixed through the scope. The moment after pulling the trigger always felt endless, that stretch of time between the shot and the result. To a sniper, those seconds could feel like forever. She could feel her heartbeat slowing, the adrenaline fading, leaving behind a strange calm. The shot had felt perfect. Every part of her body, every calculation, every breath had lined up exactly right. Now all she could do was wait. The general and the other soldiers stood frozen. No one dared to speak or even whisper. The valley was so quiet that even the faint hum of insects could be heard. The bullet had already traveled more than 2 miles through the air, cutting across invisible waves of wind and pressure. Then, far away, a small metallic ping echoed, faint but clear. The spotter blinked through his scope, disbelief flashing across his face. Hit, he whispered. Then louder, it's a hit, direct center. The words hit the crowd like lightning. The soldiers gasped, some cheered, others just stood in shock. They had seen elite snipers miss over and over again, but she had done it on her first try. The general's eyebrows shot up, and he lowered his binoculars slowly, his face a mix of amazement and pride. Emily finally lifted her head from the scope. Her eyes were calm, her face peaceful, as if this was nothing unusual for her. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She just took a deep breath and exhaled quietly. Around her, the world exploded with excitement. One soldier near the front clapped his hands together. Another shouted, "No way! Did you see that? She actually hit it." The younger recruits began cheering loudly. Even some of the senior officers smiled, shaking their heads in disbelief. It was one of those rare moments that no one would ever forget, the kind that turned into a story told for years. The general took a few steps forward, his boots crunching on the gravel. He stopped beside Emily, still staring at the distant target through his binoculars. There was no mistaking it. The bullet had pierced the center cleanly. He lowered the binoculars, looked at her, and said in a low voice, "Sergeant Lawson, that was extraordinary." Emily turned to face him, standing straight and respectful. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. He studied her face for a moment. She looked completely calm, not proud or boastful, just quietly confident. It made him curious. "How did you do it?" he asked. "That shot. 4,000 meters, perfect hit. No one's ever done that here." Emily hesitated for a moment, then answered honestly, "I just trusted what I've learned, sir. The wind, the distance, the feel of the trigger. Everything matters." Her words were simple, but the general could tell they came from experience. This wasn't luck. She knew exactly what she was doing. The spotter confirmed again, "Sir, the bullet went straight through the center. I've never seen a cleaner shot." The general turned to the soldiers and said, "Well, gentlemen, it looks like Sergeant Lawson just made history." His voice carried pride now, not sarcasm. The soldiers cheered again, this time louder. Emily, however, didn't let the attention distract her. She calmly set the rifle down on the mat and began checking its chamber, ensuring it was clear. Every motion she made was careful and respectful, the kind of discipline that showed her deep respect for her weapon and the art of shooting. She remembered her father again in that moment, his voice echoing in her memory. A rifle isn't just a tool, it's a test of patience. The bullet listens to your calm. She smiled faintly to herself, knowing he would have been proud. The general watched her quietly. He wasn't just impressed, he was moved. He had started the morning thinking this demonstration would be a lesson in failure, a way to push his soldiers harder. But instead, he had witnessed something far more powerful. A reminder that true talent doesn't always come from where you expect it. He finally broke the silence. "Sergeant," he said, his tone softer now. "That was 1 in a million. Do you realize what you just did?" Emily looked up at him, her eyes thoughtful. "Just my duty, sir," she replied simply. Her humility caught him off guard. He gave a small laugh and shook his head. Duty? That shot could have won a battle on its own. The soldiers behind them were still buzzing with excitement. Some were already walking toward the target area to see the hit up close. The general waved his hand. "Go ahead, verify it. I want to see that hole myself." Minutes later, one of the soldiers came running back, holding up the metal plate with a clean hole right through the center. "Sir," confirmed. "Dead center," he shouted. The crowd erupted again. The general smiled broadly and turned to Emily. "Well, Sergeant Lawson, looks like you've just embarrassed my entire sniper unit." This time, even Emily couldn't stop a small smile. "I didn't mean to, sir," she said softly. The general nodded, chuckling. "I know. That's what makes it even better." He turned to the soldiers and said loudly, "Let this be a lesson to all of you. Skill has no gender, no title, and no limit. What matters most is focus, patience, and courage. Sergeant Lawson just showed you all that." The soldiers clapped again, and Emily felt her cheeks warm slightly. She wasn't used to so much attention. She had always worked quietly in the background, content with her small role in logistics. But now, standing there in the middle of the firing range, surrounded by cheers, she realized something important. She didn't just prove herself to the general or to the others. She had proven something to herself. She had faced doubt, laughter, and disbelief, and answered it all with a single perfect shot. As the crowd slowly began to disperse, the general placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've got a gift, Sergeant," he said sincerely. "Don't ever hide it again." Emily nodded. "Yes, sir." The wind picked up again, blowing gently across the field. She looked toward the distant hills where her bullet had traveled and smiled quietly. It wasn't just a target she had hit that day, it was a barrier of doubt, expectation, and limitation. And with one calm pull of the trigger, she had shattered it completely. "You said." The news of Emily's unbelievable shot spread through the entire base like wildfire. By the next morning, almost everyone had heard about the woman who had hit a target at 4,000 meters. Something even the most trained snipers had failed to do. Soldiers from other units came by the range just to see the spot where she had stood, to look at the target plate with the perfect hole through the middle. Some still couldn't believe it was real. Emily, however, didn't act any different. She went back to her normal duties, helping organize supplies, maintaining rifles, and keeping quiet as always. But things around her had changed. People looked at her differently now, with respect, curiosity, and a bit of awe. When she walked into the mess hall that morning, conversations paused for a second. Then the whispers started. "That's her. The one who made the 4,000-meter shot. No way, she looks so calm. You'd never guess. She's the real deal." Even the general was speechless. Emily heard the whispers but didn't let them bother her. She wasn't someone who liked attention. For her, that shot wasn't about fame. It was about proving that she belonged. Not as a woman in a man's unit, but as a soldier just like everyone else. Later that day, as she cleaned her rifle, a familiar voice called out behind her. "You're becoming quite the legend around here, Sergeant." She turned around and saw the general standing there, holding a folder in his hand. He looked less formal today, his expression more thoughtful than commanding. Sir, Emily said, standing at attention. At ease, he said with a small smile. Mind if I sit? She nodded and gestured toward a nearby crate. The general sat down and looked at her rifle on the table, the same one that had made history just a day ago. I've been thinking a lot about that shot, he said quietly. You didn't just hit a target, Sergeant. You made the impossible look easy. That's rare. Emily didn't know what to say, so she just listened. The general opened the folder and slid it toward her. Inside was a set of papers with her name on them. What's this? She asked. A transfer order, he said. I want you to join the special long-range marksmanship program. We're forming a new sniper division, and I want you to train with the best. Emily blinked in surprise. Sir, me? But I'm not. He raised a hand, cutting her off. Don't argue, Sergeant. You've already proven you're qualified. In fact, you're more than qualified. She stared at the papers, her heart pounding. The special long-range program was something only elite shooters got into, soldiers who had years of experience and training. The thought of being chosen for it felt unreal. I don't know if I'm ready for that, sir, she admitted softly. The general looked at her seriously. You're ready. You've been ready for a long time. You just needed the chance to show it. There was silence for a moment. Emily looked down at the rifle on the table, her father's old advice echoing in her mind again. The bullet listens to your calm. Maybe this was what he had meant, that one day her patience and focus would lead her somewhere she never expected. Finally, she nodded. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. The general smiled. I know you won't. That evening, when she returned to her quarters, she found a small group of soldiers waiting outside her door. They were from her old logistics team, the ones who had worked beside her every day. Hey, Emily, one of them said, grinning. We heard the news. You're leaving us for the sniper unit. Huh. Emily smiled faintly. Looks like it. Don't forget us when you become famous, another teased. She laughed softly. I'll always remember where I started. They talked for a while, joking and laughing. But when they left, Emily sat quietly by her bed, holding the transfer papers. She felt a mix of emotions. Pride, nervousness, and a strange kind of sadness. Change was always hard, but she knew this was a chance she couldn't ignore. The next morning, she woke up before sunrise. The camp was still quiet, the air cool and filled with the smell of morning dew. She packed her bag carefully, placing her rifle inside its case last. Before she left, she took one last look around her small room, the place that had been her home for so long. Then she walked out toward the waiting transport jeep. The general was already there, standing beside it. Ready? He asked. Yes, sir, she replied. He nodded approvingly. Good. The team is waiting for you at the training base. They're some of the best in the country. But I have a feeling you'll surprise them too. As the jeep started moving, Emily looked out the window at the camp disappearing behind her. The fields, the firing range, the people, all fading into the distance. Felt strange to leave, but also exciting. She wasn't just going somewhere new. She was stepping into her true calling. The ride was long and quiet. Miles of open land stretched around them, with the sun slowly rising over the horizon. Emily thought about everything that had happened in the last few days. The laughter, the disbelief, the single shot that changed everything. When the jeep finally arrived at the new base, she saw a group of soldiers waiting at the gate. They looked serious, focused snipers in training. As she stepped out, they looked her up and down, curious. One of them smirked slightly, as if doubting what he had heard about her. Emily met their gaze calmly. She didn't need to prove herself with words. She would do it the same way she always had, through action, patience, and precision. Inside, as she unpacked her rifle and prepared for her first day of advanced training, she took a deep breath. The road ahead was going to be tough, but she was ready, because now everyone knew her name. Sergeant Emily Lawson, the woman who had hit 4,000 meters and shattered every expectation. And this, she realized, was only the beginning. When Emily arrived at the new sniper training base, the atmosphere felt completely different from anything she had experienced before. Everything here was sharper, quieter, more focused. Soldiers walked with discipline, every movement calculated. The air was filled with the sound of distant gunfire echoing from the shooting ranges. These weren't ordinary soldiers, they were specialists, the best of the best. As she stepped out of the jeep, a tall man with a stern face approached her. His uniform bore the insignia of a senior sniper instructor. "Sergeant Lawson?" he asked in a deep voice. "Yes, sir," she replied, standing straight. "I'm Captain Reeves. I'll be your instructor for this program," he said, giving her a firm nod. "Welcome to the Special Long-Range Marksmanship Unit. We don't hand out praise here, only results." Emily nodded. "Understood, sir." He studied her face for a moment, probably expecting to see hesitation or fear, but Emily's calm expression stayed the same. Reeves gave a small, approving smile. "Good. Let's see if the stories about you are true." He led her to the training field, where 5 other soldiers were already setting up their rifles. They all looked up as Emily approached. She could feel their eyes on her, some curious, some doubtful. Word had already spread that a woman had hit a 4,000-meter target, but few actually believed it. "Everyone, this is Sergeant Emily Lawson," Captain Reeves announced. "You've probably heard of her shot. She'll be training with us from today." One of the snipers, a tall, muscular man named Harris, smirked. "That shot was real, sir? 4,000 meters? Sounds like a story from the campfire." Reeves looked at him sharply. "You'll see for yourself soon enough." Then he turned back to Emily. "Get your gear ready. We start in 10. Emily unpacked her rifle calmly. She could feel the pressure around her, but she didn't let it bother her. She knew she had to prove herself all over again, and that didn't scare her. It motivated her. The first day of training was brutal. The exercises were designed to test endurance, focus, and precision. The snipers had to crawl through mud, move silently across rough terrain, and shoot from uncomfortable positions while dealing with wind, heat, and exhaustion. By midday, most of them were drenched in sweat and covered in dirt. Harris and a few others threw her quick glances, expecting her to slow down or give up. But Emily stayed steady. She moved with quiet determination, her breathing controlled, her focus unbroken. When it came time for the long-range shooting session, Captain Reeves set up several targets at increasing distances, 800 meters, 1,200 meters, 2,000 meters, and one at the farthest edge of the field, 3,800 meters. "Let's see what you've got," he said. The others took turns first. Their shots were good, precise, clean, but not perfect. Wind shifts caused minor misses, a few inches off target here and there. Then it was Emily's turn. She adjusted her rifle, lying flat on the ground. The others stood behind her, whispering among themselves. Harris crossed his arms, clearly skeptical. Emily focused through her scope. She could feel the wind brushing against her cheek, hear the faint hum of the air moving across the field. She made small adjustments to her sight, counted the seconds between gusts, and slowed her breathing. Then she squeezed the trigger. The bullet flew across the vast distance. A few seconds later, a metallic clang echoed across the field. Bullseye. The silence that followed was thick. The spotter looked up and said, "Hit! Direct center." Captain Reeves raised his eyebrows slightly, impressed. "Good shot, Sergeant." Emily nodded once, already setting up for the next one. The others were watching closely now, their earlier doubt turning into quiet respect. She fired again, another direct hit. Then another. Each time, her timing, control, and precision were perfect. By the end of the session, even Harris couldn't hide his shock. He gave a low whistle. "Guess that story wasn't a lie after all." Captain Reeves approached her and said, "That level of accuracy doesn't come from luck. How did you learn to read the wind so well?" Emily smiled faintly. "From my father, sir. He used to tell me the wind has a voice, you just have to listen." Reeves nodded thoughtfully. Wise man. From that day on, Emily became the center of quiet admiration among the snipers. She didn't talk much, but her performance spoke for her. Every drill, every test, she gave her best. Not because she wanted praise, but because she loved the craft of precision. As the days passed, Reeves began giving her more complex challenges. Shooting through different weather conditions at moving targets, or even at night with limited visibility. Emily handled each one with calm focus. She never rushed a shot. She always waited for the perfect moment. One evening, after another long day of training, Reeves called her into his office. "You're progressing fast, Sergeant," he said. "Faster than anyone I've seen. But there's something else I need to tell you." Emily tilted her head slightly. "Sir, there's a field test coming," Reeves said. "Real-world conditions. We'll be observing a live mission from a safe distance, but your accuracy and timing will play a key role. This isn't training anymore. This will decide who joins the elite sniper team permanently." Emily took a deep breath. "When does it begin?" "Tomorrow morning." She nodded. "I'll be ready." Reeves looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, "You remind me of myself 20 years ago, except you're calmer. Don't lose that." That night, Emily couldn't sleep easily. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led her here. From being laughed at by soldiers at her old base to being chosen for the top sniper program, it felt unreal. But deep down, she knew this was her path. Before she closed her eyes, she whispered quietly, "I'll make you proud, Dad." The next morning, before sunrise, she stood ready at the field with her rifle, the cool breeze brushing against her face. The mission briefing began, but Emily's focus was already somewhere else. Far ahead, beyond the trees at the target zone. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't afraid. She was ready. Because for Emily Lawson, the woman who once shocked the army with a single shot, this wasn't just another test. This was her chance to prove that her 4,000-meter miracle wasn't luck. It was skill, patience, and purpose. And this time, the world would see that for themselves. The morning of the field test began before the sun had fully risen. The air was cold and heavy with mist, and the world around Emily felt still, as if everything was holding its breath. She stood quietly beside her rifle, her eyes scanning the horizon. This was it, the final test that would decide whether she would become a permanent member of the elite sniper unit. Captain Reeves walked up to the group of snipers and began speaking in a calm but firm voice. "This isn't training anymore. Out there, 2 miles from this point, a mock enemy convoy will move across the valley. You'll be timed, and accuracy will decide everything. One mistake, one hesitation, and you're out." The other snipers nodded seriously. Emily, standing among them, didn't move or speak. Her face was calm, her heartbeat steady. She had trained for this. She knew she could do it. "Positions," Reeves ordered. The team moved quietly to their designated areas, crawling through tall grass and setting up their rifles. The early sunlight shimmered faintly on the scopes as they adjusted their sights. Emily found her spot, a flat patch of ground behind a low hill that gave her a perfect angle on the valley below. Through her scope, she could see the mock convoy already beginning to move. 3 vehicles were rolling slowly across the dirt road, guarded by simulated soldiers with fake but realistic-looking weapons. The challenge wasn't just hitting the targets, it was doing it under real mission pressure, calculating movement, wind, and distance all at once. Reeves' voice came through the headset. "Snipers, you are clear to engage. Begin." The first sniper fired, a loud crack echoed, and one of the moving targets dropped. Then another shot came from the left side. Slightly off, it missed by inches. Emily exhaled slowly, keeping her focus. She adjusted her scope for the wind, which had picked up slightly from the east. Her finger rested gently on the trigger, not pressing, just waiting for the right second. The convoy turned slightly, giving her a better line of sight. She saw her target, the lead enemy soldier beside the first vehicle. Now, she fired. The bullet sliced through the air, traveling across the long valley. A faint delay, then the target dropped instantly. "Hit confirmed," the spotter said over the headset. Emily didn't smile. She was already moving to her second target. She shifted her rifle slightly, adjusted the scope again, and fired another shot, direct hit. Her movements were smooth, fluid, without panic or hesitation. It was as if she was dancing with the rifle, every motion timed perfectly with her breathing. Around her, other snipers were struggling with the shifting wind. Some shots hit, others missed. The pressure was rising. Reeves watched the screens in the control tent, tracking everyone's performance. When he saw Emily's data, he leaned forward in surprise. Every single shot she took was perfect. By the 5th minute, she had hit 7 targets. By the 10th, she had hit 12, all with flawless precision. Then Reeves gave a new order. Final test, long-distance confirmation shot. Target, 3,900 meters, East Ridge. You have 1 attempt. The snipers froze for a second. That was an almost impossible distance. The wind alone could make or break the shot. Emily's heart beat a little faster, but her hands stayed steady. She adjusted her rifle carefully, calculating the distance, elevation, and air pressure. She remembered her father's words again. The bullet listens to your calm. She slowed her breathing until everything around her seemed to fade away. The noise, the chatter, even the heartbeat in her ears. All that existed now was her, the rifle, and the target. When she finally pulled the trigger, time seemed to stop. The shot echoed softly, then silence. A few seconds later, the spotter gasped. Hit! Dead center! The entire range erupted. Even Reeves couldn't hide his smile. He turned to the others in the command tent and said quietly, "She did it again." Meanwhile, out in the field, Emily stayed still for a few seconds after the shot, her eye still on the scope. When she finally looked up, she saw the target down. A perfect hit at nearly 4,000 meters. A small, proud smile appeared on her face. Reeves' voice came through the radio. "Sergeant Lawson, outstanding work. You've just broken every record this unit has." Her teammates gathered around her as the exercise ended. Harris, the same soldier who had doubted her before, walked over with a grin. "All right, Lawson, I give up. You're the best shot I've ever seen." Emily laughed softly. "Thanks, Harris." Captain Reeves approached, holding a clipboard. "I've seen hundreds of snipers train here," he said. "Some brilliant, some brave. But what you did today was beyond anything I expected." He extended his hand. "Congratulations, Sergeant. You've officially earned your place on the elite team." Emily shook his hand firmly, her eyes shining with quiet pride. "Thank you, sir." Reeves nodded. "You didn't just hit a target today, Lawson. You set a new standard for everyone." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the snipers gathered by the campfire, tired but cheerful. They shared stories, laughter, and light teasing. For the first time, Emily felt completely accepted, not as the woman who surprised everyone, but as one of them. Later, when everyone went to rest, Emily walked alone toward the edge of the field. The night was calm, and the stars stretched endlessly above her. She sat down on the grass, her rifle beside her, and looked up at the sky. It had been a long journey, from being laughed at by the general to standing here as part of the best sniper team in the country. She had faced doubt, pressure, and loneliness, but she had never lost her focus. She thought of her father again and whispered, "You were right, Dad. Patience wins every battle." At that moment, Captain Reeves walked up quietly behind her. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. Emily smiled. "Just thinking." He looked at the stars too. "You've got a rare gift, Lawson. But more than that, you've got the heart of a soldier. Never lose that." "I won't, sir," she said softly. He nodded and walked away, leaving her under the vast night sky. Emily stayed there for a while longer, listening to the wind moving gently through the grass. It sounded like a whisper, calm, steady, familiar. She closed her eyes and smiled. That day, Emily Lawson didn't just become the Army's best sniper. She became a symbol, a reminder that courage, focus, and determination can break any limit. And somewhere deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning of her story.